at decarbonisation and wellness and the innovation underway to provide the necessary solutions. I'd now like to hand over to our moderator for today, Michael Carmelengo, who is a partner at KPMG and head of infrastructure. Michael is also chair of OzCham's Construction, Property and Infrastructure Committee. Over to you, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo, and welcome everybody. The good news is that we got the memo from OzCham to wear the same outfit today, so you might get us all confused if you're not looking closely enough. But better buildings is the topic, and we all know that better buildings is something that is close to all of us, or many of us in Hong Kong in our day-to-day lives, as we all often either live vertically or work vertically or both. And in recent years, there's been a big movement towards greater sustainability, greater digitisation and technology, and greater wellness in our built environment. And COVID-19 has only served to accelerate that trend. So today we're going to touch on that, and we're going to hear from our two guests, Andrew and Pubs. So I'll introduce Andrew, Pubs first, I should say. Pubs Abayasiri is with CLP Innovation Enterprises. He's an associate director there, and he's worked in the technology and energy sector for over 15 years. In that time, he's worked in consulting and held many positions across industries with different companies, primarily in the energy space. As I said, currently he's at CLP Holdings, where Pubs runs the digital products team, where he focuses on energy saving solutions. Also joining us today is Andrew Young. Andrew is an associate director for innovation with Sinai Group. And Andrew has over 38 years of executive experience, including in a previous role as the Chief Commercial Officer of the Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks Corporation and Director of Partnership Development for the Hong Kong Polytech University. In his role with Sinai Group, he's responsible for exploring and identifying innovations and technologies for applications across the group and investment opportunities in technology ventures. He's also a chartered professional engineer, a member of the Institute of Engineers of Australia. So on that note, I'll hand over to Andrew, who's going to kick us off with a 10-minute presentation on some of the great work that Sinai is doing.
Good. Okay, thank you, Michael. So what I'll do is I'll share today about the journey to innovation. Now, as probably many of you are in the infrastructure business now. People ask, why isn't Hong Kong as advanced in using technology like some other countries that we've seen around the world? I mean, actually, Hong Kong is not bad, but we're really not so advanced into it. Now, one of the things we keep hearing is that because the infrastructure, the property market in Hong Kong is doing very well without the technology, and therefore people has no incentive to install new technology. But I think COVID really changed how we see things for the future. So I'm just going to talk about a journey to innovation today. Now, I believe it is critical for real estate to adapt and stay relevant to the market because the future generation will demand much, much more. So next page, please. Just quickly talk about InnoLab, but those of you who are interested, you Google InnoLab, Sinai InnoLab, you see it, and you can go in and tour it. But essentially, I think the gist of it all is that people do not adapt innovation because people are fearful of doing something wrong, especially in a mature industry. A lot of professionals say, well, I better do something that is not our norm. And so therefore, we created this sandbox concept. I said to when I joined our group, which is 11,000 people, there was no innovation department before, so I started it. And so we created a sandbox concept and say, well, you come to my turf in my lab to try new things. If it goes wrong, I'll shield the responsibility. If not, you can take the credit. And that kind of let people relax, and then we become a facilitator for adoption and become a champion for PropTech development in Hong Kong. Next, please. So just very quickly, over the years, we also opened, last couple of years, we opened our lab to the public, I mean, professional public, not public, to come in. So if those of you are interested, do contact OzCham, and maybe OzCham can organize a tour to that. I mean, so we hosted quite a lot of visits. It's like over 4,000 people. Next one, please. And then, so in essence, these are the three critical dimensions that we look at. That any innovation we adopt must be enhancement to our business model. It would offer some operational process improvement and better our customer experience. I think that's the three basic criteria we look at. Next one, please. So these are a range of partners. As you can see, we are working with people all over the world. Israel, Europe, Hong Kong, of course, with CLP is one of our close partners here in Hong Kong. We work with all the universities, and I've actually have been in close contact with CSIRO and also with Macquarie University in Australia, of course, to the Australian Consulate to help us to do that. So as we move along, next one, please. I might just hop on to, given time, if we just hop on to the next page, to go on and then go on. Okay, I'll stay on this page. Now, this is kind of the technology focus area that we pitch ourselves towards. As you can see, we're pitching in three areas. Construction, which is one of our main business is in constructing, we're a developer, therefore, construction process is part and parcel of what we really concentrate on. And we sell and lease buildings, so therefore sales and leasing is also a big focus area. And the third area is managing existing asset. Now, this is where we see in over COVID, what I found myself, first of all, is I could not travel. So it's like for 20 years, last year was the year, maybe more than that, 18 months now, that my last travel was January 2020 to US and Canada, and that I have not traveled anywhere, only across the sea between Kowloon and Hong Kong, not even to Macau. Now, so it's a new norm, but throughout that period, so what I've been looking at, focusing on is we've been looking at technology worldwide to help us to overcome the challenge of COVID. Now, one of the things that we really are looking at, we are the first developer in Hong Kong to embrace wellness as a new standard for our living, or for our residential estate. It's a US standard. Wellness covers anything from temperature, humidity, noise, feeling, ambient, feeling, quite a number of factors. We're the first one in Hong Kong to attain wellness for our, but what that means to our customers is people feel safe in the assets that we manage. And so progressively, we have been looking at technology. Of course, last year, the run of the mill was really how do we clean buildings? How do we do contactless management? How do we shield our colleagues from the fear of contacting somebody? There was a recent case up here in Central where the Centrum, which is one of Sinai building, and everybody have to do the test because one of the severe case happened to have an office there. So again, a lot of fearful. So we've been looking at sanitization technology, what are the best air cleaner around, and of course with the gym effect and the restaurant effect, and people are looking to ways of replenishing fresh air. And of course you can't bring in more fresh air because the building is built. So how do you have filters and cleaners that could give the equivalent effect so the government allows restaurants to reopen? And then how do we clean, sanitization? How do we get a robot into? So that's been keeping us really, really busy. But of course, fundamental, that is one aspect to give customer a feeling of wellness. But for us, sustainability is the key. And that's why in the building management side, one of the major focus we have been looking at is reducing costs, using less energy, sorry, CLP, but we want to use it rightly. So air conditioning power is one of our biggest electricity bill. So we've been looking at severely a number of technology, and perhaps Puck can talk about. We have done a very interesting project together, and with that. But can I go to the next slide, please? And just maybe I'll just use this as a case study to share. So when I started with our group, I kind of tell my colleagues, oh, we have to look at energy saving. They said, well, we're already using. We took out all the fluorescent light in our car park, we're using LED. But then, no, we went on and did with a local startup. This is the Olympian City, OC3 car park, the small car park. We started with this startup from Canada, but operating in Hong Kong. It's an intelligent system that we can intelligently control every light in the car park, which means But what we found is the added benefit out of that is, apart from the tremendous saving from the original LED lighting that we have already enjoyed a lot of power saving on, is the smartness by tuning down to 20%. The whole car park level comes down when there's no occupant. We see a consistently lower power consumption. But the added benefit is the moment somebody comes around, especially in the middle of the night, if somebody is sneaking behind a vehicle, the light will pop on. So what the colleagues are saying is that, well, it actually helped them to alert to the point that something, there shouldn't be people moving there at 2 a.m. and so the security guard will actually take a look at the camera and see who has gone in. So there are other benefits, but with that success, I was able to convince my colleagues to go on. So we're now expanding this solution to other larger car parks, which hopefully will use lesser energy. But I think CLP want to work with us to use energy smartly. So on that score, I think it's a short presentation, but I'd just like to finish off with this very last one. This is something called we call the entertainer. So it's like an energy container. Now, we are installing this on every of our new construction site. Now, typically, when you go to a new construction site, you would see big diesel generators that provides noisy air pollution creation, but it provides energy for the crane that lift things above for the construction site. Now, it's noisy, it's pollutant. So we've invested in this startup, and now we're installing this onto every construction site. It's actually on rental basis. But what it does, we take power in from CLP, keep charging it up, but the moment the crane is lifting something heavy, it draws the power down, which CLP cannot feed instantaneously. And then as we finish with that, the power charges up. But what we are seeing is this innovation is giving us better ability to provide a much better ambient, because now we can install a lot of IoT sensors. In the past, in the construction site, there's nowhere to hang them to, right? So with that, we can put a server, we can put all these, the infrastructure, the gateway, everything in, and sensors collecting, and there's power. It's quiet. It gives colleagues and the workers and the surrounding neighborhood a quiet ambient during construction, but it gives a lot of data. So we can see by embracing innovation and technology, it's giving us not just in better living, but also better control of construction site data as it come along. So I'll stop here, just two simple examples. And maybe Pat can share about, we have a joint project, so maybe you can also talk about that as well.
Yeah, sure. In fact, I think Andrew's introduction is sort of the embodiment of the new types of customers that we have. We've been amazingly well at providing energy, but we've got customers that are talking about lithium-ion batteries, about energy saving in buildings. And I think also I want to pick up on what Andrew highlighted earlier about we want to use energy the right way. And that's absolutely our view as well. We've got a very, very long term about energy usage. The project that Andrew was alluding to, in fact, more than about a year ago, I had the privilege of being invited to the Sinai lab. And it's an amazing little Willy Wonka and chocolate factory kind of setup where there's lots of little toys there. And we started speaking about, well, what can we deploy in one of the Sinai properties? In Olympian City, it's a very, very large shopping center where there's a huge amount of foot traffic that's there. And certainly the right shopping experience is very, very important. But then we also wanted to try and see if there's ways that we can optimize the energy usage. For us, we look at buildings in three sort of dimensions when it comes to energy efficiency. So one is having ears and eyes, so understanding what's happening. This is beyond traditional building management systems, but having analytics to understand where faults are happening, where there's going to be issues of energy wastage so that the facility management team can spend their time efficiently. The second area is about automation. We've got lots of experience with team members that are across and managing a building, but they can't be everywhere at once. So how can you use available technology now? And really the third area is about that efficiency piece. There's a lot of experience that we all have, but then the other piece that Andrew touched on was about data and automation. So how can we use that data to automate these buildings? So we looked at the Olympian City and looked at the chiller. So typically chillers consume about 60-70% energy in a building, and Olympian City was no different. And we deployed a solution called Plant Pro, which is a hardware edge-based device which will connect to the chiller and will adjust the settings of the chiller automatically. So a typical large building has multiple chillers, and the way that I operate it is you charge up the first one, once that's full, you get the second one, and then once that's full, you do the third one. But that's probably not the most optimal way to running equipment or even running any type of resources. Imagine you have a team of 10 people. Once the first person is fully loaded, then you give work to the second person. And that's typically how some chillers are operated. We use this device to adjust the settings on the chillers automatically so that we don't have anyone need to do it manually. And it was based on sensors, exactly the IoT scenarios that Andrew spoke about. During this process, we actually learned a lot around how to integrate to existing environments, because there's a building that was built decades ago, and this is no different to a lot of other properties that are in Hong Kong. They were built at a time where energy efficiency, decarbonisation wasn't on top of everyone's agenda, but what do you do now with all this infrastructure? So that was a great example. At the end of the project, once we deployed it, we ran it for several months. Within an 8-month period, we just finished the analysis, and what we realized was we could save about 38 tons of carbon. It's massive. So just to put that into context, you would need enough trees to fill up Kowloon Park in order to sequester that amount of carbon. So that's a lot of space. So it's a huge improvement. And the great thing is that the comfort that I spoke about, there's been no change in that comfort. So it's this idea of how can you change it or use some of the gaps or the flexibility that's there and optimize it. The technology is here, and we're really excited to work with partners such as Sinai that are willing to take that step and deploy these kinds of solutions.
That's fantastic. And by the way, for the audience, if you do have questions, please feel free to start typing them into the chat, or indeed raise your hand and we'll get to your questions. Just picking up on that, Pubs, it sounds like this was quite a pioneering, trailblazing initiative, right? In this building. Presumably, you learned some lessons from that as well. Could you perhaps share a few thoughts on that side?
Yeah. So when we first looked at this space of building energy management, I think several years ago, when we engaged lots of facility teams, I think there was a bit of an aversion for having automation on some equipment. Don't touch my chillers, they're very important. If something breaks, everyone's going to complain and everyone's going to scream at me. We've noticed that I think a lot of building operators and owners have shifted a little bit. I think there's a lot of comfort in adopting technology, and Sinai Lab, I think, is a great example of that, where I think people understand how technology can help and it's not necessarily a threat which is going to cause more problems. So I think that was good that we had that realization and we could validate that with the Sinai team. I think the second thing is about the integration and also having the right success criteria. Because we spoke a lot about, well, what are your pain points? Is it issues around energy saving, or is it issues around resources? Because you've got a team that's got to be doing many, many things. Do they actually have time to look at the energy profile of the building and understand, well, here are the gaps. Let me do that analysis and test these hypotheses. Yes. Let's face it, no one really has time to do that. And that's why we focused on that. So one of the things we did was we looked at a before and after. So we did a benchmark to understand what the energy profile was, deployed the solution, monitored and tweaked it, and we could do the analysis afterwards and actually see those measures and see if those success criteria were met. This was something that we were especially proud of, because when we hear in the market, I think there's a lot of energy solutions out there where there is a potential or a promise of energy saving. It's there, it could happen, but I think it's really important in order to go through this systematically. We all have different bodies, we have different health profiles, and the same diet or health profile doesn't work for all of us, and it's no different for buildings. So it's good to really have this hypothesis, test it out, validate it, and if it works, then expand it. And I think that was really good with working with the science.
Just picking up on that, from your perspective, Andrew, as the asset owner, right? You live with the changes. How do you, as an organisation, process something like that? So you would get lots of ideas. So how do you sort of process those ideas and then take them forward?
Yeah, the major challenge, use a case as part sharing. I use it as an example to see. The major challenge I found is the culture and the risk-averse attitude of people. And a lot of people in our industry the whole building industry is built upon the base of doing something standardization, something that's been well proven. Don't take risks because there's customer at risk, there's the boss at risk. Don't take risks and do not do anything off the norm. And if we use this as an example, so me coming from the good thing for me is I'm not from a property sector. I did not come from a property sector, although I'm an engineer. I did some construction many years ago. But so coming from a technology background, I can see, many things are possible. I can see beyond, but I can't convince my colleagues. And so the same thing when, we first talked about and come and said, we can do this, I say, that's a great idea. And my colleagues will say, well, but, we have all these new sensors installed. We've upgraded our chillers. We've upgraded the latest controls. We've got all this algorithm in place. And, what can they do more that I can't have already achieved? I say, well, it's like cooking something. You can do a bit of fine tuning, a bit of taste at a different point in time. You can create something. So in the end, long story short, took us quite a little while to convince my colleagues and say, let's get a project on trial to start. And by and behold, I think when they saw the result within the 4 months, and he was over the moon and saying, I can go to big boss now and say, our payback estimation has been shrink. And the boss is saying, well, why did you do more? And he said, oh yeah, now I need the budget to do more. Now, and I think the change, that is reminiscent of an attitude and culture that we see in the infrastructure built environment market in Asia. In fact, globally, I think a lot of people are so risk averse because you do not want the building to go wrong. But I think COVID has changed a lot of things. And the drive towards ESG, the drive towards sustainability by LISCO has changed a lot of that. Now the drive is saying, why are you not doing it? Because our investors are saying, as a LISCO, why are you not doing something to reduce carbon? So we have, so corporate are now beginning to say that, well, we have a certain target to achieve and pushing our colleagues to say, and technology and innovation become the impetus, the tools that they can use to achieve that goal. And now, slowly, we're changing the culture. So it's been a challenging process. But for me, I've been with our group for 3.5 years, and it took us, a good year plus to really push around. And slowly, we're making progress forward.
That's great, Andrew. I mean, that's you touched on decarbonisation there and a little bit on Sinai Group's journey. I'd be keen to actually unpack that a bit more and talk a bit more about that at both your organisations. But perhaps, Hubs, could you share a bit around CLP and how your own internal initiatives around decarbonisation?
Yeah, we were in fact one of the first utilities within Asia Pac to be putting a vision on decarbonisation. This was more than 10 years ago, our 2050 vision. And we've been doing a lot of programs on making our internal operations a lot more greener. But I guess what we also wanted to focus on was there is a generation side, so making sure having the right mix of decarbonisation fuels. But what can we do on the demand side? So that's also an area that we wanted to spend a lot of our time on. And I think we saw that as something that we should do ourselves, but then we also saw a lot of external factors precipitating that. So I think when you touched on the idea of, you're a LISCO and then there are demands there, I think a lot of customers are going through that at the moment. We had, I think, one customer that spoke about how, as part of their financing arrangement, that they've got obligations to make sure that they can save their energy to a certain level in their properties. And I think that's just becoming more and more. But how do you go through that when you've got facility teams that are not attuned to that, where they're very risk averse, where they may not necessarily have that data that's available? And that's part of our mission, in order to educate the market, have proof points, have case studies such as this, to show that you actually need to prepare for it. So get that visibility, get that data, but then also have these cases that you can showcase, so that when you do need to go through that financing arrangement, that the information is already there, and that you've got a team that's not going to take 6-9 months to say, oh no, that's going to be a little bit too risky. So I think there's this behavior change that's really important on top of any of the technologies that are available. Some of these technologies have been around for quite some time, but I think what's change now is all of these external factors, and I think we're all going through digitization programs. And I just don't forget everyone as part of that, because I think they could also be really critical as meeting your operational needs. So I think that's really a key thing that we hear time and time again with a lot of our clients.
So it sounds like people and technology, absolutely key elements of the decarbonisation journey. And Andrew, what about from your side at Sinai Group? Any other reflections on your decarbonisation journey?
Well, we started by the group also recently making a target to achieve. I think we see various developers in Hong Kong each making a target, some more bullish and some more adventurous than others, but certainly we see the sign of a sign of all the developer all working towards that. But if I may share, I'm part of a group called the PropTech Alliance of Hong Kong, and this is a group recently formed. It's not a formal organization, but we have a group right now. We've got 10 of the top developers in Hong Kong, in ourselves, we call Nan Sua, Simon Kai, Newer, MTL, China Capital Women, we're 10 top names in Hong Kong. So what we've done is that we have all the innovation teams that come together. Essentially, I'm the co-lead with Hong Kong Land this year, but what it's like a platform. We want to share our knowledge and experience. So I would share my projects with others because there's no, I don't need to hide, because if we're achieving something good with pubs, they should do something. Hong Kong Land should do something with them, so you get more business. But essentially, what we're seeing is everybody, we're looking at area of interest. Decarbonisation was the top of the agenda. All the groups say that's our focus. So I think let's go focusing on ESG, focusing on sustainability. I think all those, and that top down would drive the teams to go bottom up. But we need to change the culture of not just a senior executive, but operational team and the engineer down level. Everybody need to filter in. But as we see, it's a big cultural change process. As we're also involved in the internal what we call Sinovation, that we're encouraging teams, even like operator level, to come up with innovation ideas, and then they can put up as a proposal. We judge it and we implement and give them some awards. It's a long process. It takes 1 year for an exercise, but we just did one, and then we're now redoing this again. It's the second run. So that, I think, for any corporation, it needs to be a sustainable way of pushing cultural change amongst people and focusing on key objectives that is set by top management. And I think this is sustainability. This is exactly the key we are focusing on.
Well, that's fantastic. As a resident of Hong Kong, that's fantastic to hear, right? That the developers aren't competing; they're actually collaborating to create impact for the community. So that's brilliant to hear. We've talked a lot about existing buildings, right? As we know, Hong Kong has a very vertical built environment, but there's also a massive pipeline of new projects coming to market, both buildings, real estate development, but also infrastructure. Perhaps, Andrew, I'm keen to hear from you, about some of the initiatives, design initiatives, ideas that you're starting to see in new builds coming through.
Okay. So we have progressively feeding some of our, because in the InnoLab, we come across like annually, we come across maybe 1,000 innovations. We filter down, and eventually maybe 2 or 3 dozen may fit into and so we feed a lot of these to our new project team. Now, project team would then have to embrace some of this technology and new ideas based on budget and everything. But we are seeing signs of, we're looking at sustainable. I mean, we look, in my earlier slide, I showed some of the area in construction we're looking at is how do we use more environmentally friendly materials? How do we build in energy saving, not retrofitting, but from day one, when we spec it, it has to be built in. But how do we bring in right technology to give better environment that when we go into the lift lobby, I know the air is cleaner. Another example is we've been fitting around with robot. One of the project that we just won an award recently, the Swiss Invention Institute. We have a little robot that we send it patrolling around the floor space, but we feed on sensors to it. So by that little robot patrolling around, apart from being a customer service thing, it also picks up air data, indoor air quality data. But for me, that is a way of picking up data according to matrix. So I know where and when they pick up the data. I can, when it comes back, we can download it to we can analyze. So certain part of our asset, why is the air quality suddenly bad at this point in time? We can go there and analyze. So there are all these concept and idea, one step at a time, we're pushing towards that. So, we set wellness as a key objective for our corporate. And by that, it can be perception, it's physical, it's also hardware, software dependent on how we build and manage. So as a group, we're a big ship, but we're just moving towards that direction and then embracing new ideas. So welcome, opportunity to work with partners. In fact, we are currently working with a few Australian companies who has been recommended by Australia, by the council, and also by other channels to work with us in different areas. So again, we're very open about ideas to work with the Australian community. There's some good stuff from Australia.
Thank you, Andrew. I mean, this is fascinating. Personally, I believe that with new builds, in some ways, it's a lot easier to introduce innovation and create new developments because you're not dealing with existing constraints. I might just pick up on a couple of points there, if it's okay. One of the things that we're seeing with our clients, we do a lot of work with government bodies in Hong Kong, is increasing use of renewable building materials in new infrastructure and built assets. And in one case, we were managing a large-scale tender on behalf of government, and we had a proposal from a private sector where the structure of a built asset was entirely in Hong Kong, big built asset, entirely made of hardwood, right? So huge departure from the typical concrete and steel design that you see in Hong Kong. And the philosophy behind that was, it's all about sustainability, renewable, not creating materials if we already have them or can renew them. So I think we'll see more of that, not necessarily not just in Hong Kong, but around the world. I believe that'll be a trend in coming years. The other thing we're seeing is at a global level, you've got the UN race to net zero, and as part of that, a lot of corporates, including KPMG, are signing up to these science-based policy targets around their carbon footprint. And for us, that includes achieving carbon neutrality by 2030. And we're not the only ones. There's many corporates, big corporates out there moving in that direction. And so for me, I think that's actually that represents a commercial opportunity for the real estate sector as well, because what it should mean is that groups that are in that space, as they get closer to 2030, will be needing to look at their own built assets and how efficient they are and their carbon impact. And they'll be looking at new assets or existing assets that can help them achieve that. So that means that greener buildings, actually, I believe, will start to attract, if they're not already, higher rents, right? Because they're helping the big organizations achieve those goals. And then the medium-sized enterprises, smaller-sized enterprises should follow. So a commercial opportunity, I believe, there as well, not just an environmental opportunity.
I think we are seeing elements of that.
Yes.
Where there are new properties that are coming up, which are a lot greener, where tenants can actually get some visibility of that. So not just the energy, but what's the recycling of that building? Yes. What are the carbon footprint for that particular tenancy as well? And I think there is a bit of a premium that is available for that.
Yes.
So I absolutely.
It's good to see. Good to see. Well, speaking on commercials, as an organisation, CLP, when you're looking at these initiatives, what's your sort of business case process? How do you sort of look at that? And any advice you can give to other groups out there when they're assessing business cases for sustainability initiatives?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of dimensions to look at this. As large corporates have made a commitment to be carbon neutral, then it is a must-have. So it's something that you need to go through that. But then you've still got operations that are there, and it still needs to make financial sense on how you go through that journey, because you can't switch overnight. And making those cases, so if you've got existing environments, then what can you do to retrofit those environments? And that, I think, is going to be accelerating, because what would have taken 6 to 9 months to decide, should we, shouldn't we? Well, now it's, we've got to do it because we're running out of time. So I think it's looking at it from that lens. Secondly, it's also looking at it from existing maintenance activities. So we've got one property in CLP that had already a chiller that was aging. It already was at the time of replacement. So rather than just doing what needed to be done or what was replicating what was a previous business case, to look at, well, how can we look at this in a time frame where 2030 and 2035, where the whole environment's going to be quite different. And as part of that, we wanted to make sure that the energy profile, the energy usage is less. So we also want to be energy efficient internally, and through that, we deployed a lot of these solutions to make sure that the chiller can run more efficiently. It is very possible. I think the payback periods we typically see are anywhere between 1 to 3 years.
Okay.
So there is a business case for these.
I think on that, I mentioned earlier, when we look at it with a dimension of what we have seen is that most developer at the moment would naturally look at the savings and better customer experience, the two aspects. But I think the third aspect which is coming in is value creation branding, because given the current pandemic, that will change us permanently. People will look for assets that behaves, offers differently to anyone else. And that branding and value creation through innovation and decarbonization will set assets apart from others. And as you said, that will then translate into return on investment. Because right now it's about return on investment is saving. How much energy, how much less energy I can cut off the CLP bill per month, and the boss will say, lovely. But in the future, it's not about just that, because that also, in the global sense, the climate change commitment between the major power of US and China, in that, I think that would also drive the whole world into. So in the future, it's not about just return on investment, about saving, but it's value creation, perception of value in customers. In that, you can attract a higher rent and a higher property value because you are a better asset than other classes. Right.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. I've got one or two more questions, but I want to just see if there's anyone in the audience. Last chance to put your hand up or pop any questions into the chat. Please do so. One of the things we've talked about at length here, or it's come up quite a few times, is people, right? And I've heard you both, people and the customer, right? Kind of interchangeably. What are your thoughts on bringing people along for the journey, bringing stakeholders, right, along for the journey? Any insights you'd like to share there?
I think that bringing them along that journey is probably the right choice of words. All of these great technologies that are out there, there are some really interesting insights you get from these AI technologies, dashboards that are useful, but just giving a team of engineers that are managing or repairing fan units, a dashboard doesn't really transform them into the efficient staff. I think what's really important is to make sure they're part of that whole project process. Really understand how they are going through their existing operations. In our own properties and also in a large infrastructure customer, we put together an analytics solution which tells the facility team where the failures are. And we thought, okay, that's a great solution because they can save their time. But what we didn't realize was that the information was also going to the boss. And the manager would also see where he could prioritize his resources, because every day they're fighting fires, and the allocation of resources isn't something that a working team is focused on, but a manager can be. And they never really get that insight. So I think that's really been a key aspect that helps slowly change the operations and behavior of the organization, which then helps to turn the wheels over and become a lot more efficient. So just putting together a case of, here's data insights is not enough. I think it's tying it to those pain points and then going back and replaying that to each of the stakeholders, the working level, but then also the supervisors.
About making life easier for people, right?
Right.
Absolutely. So I'm conscious of time. Maybe one final question for each of you. We're still well and truly on this sustainability and decarbonisation journey. But if you could sort of get your crystal ball out and think about the future, what trend do each of you think will be, the next big thing that we might start to see in the built asset environment? So perhaps you.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see is probably a higher demand from customers on this. We touched on this topic earlier around everyone having sustainability commitments. We've had lots of conversations from customers that have headquarters overseas, and the targets have been set overseas, but then each of the regional units need to execute. And there, I think there's sometimes a bit of inflexibility because there's constraints around it. Well, I don't own my own building. I don't own my own fleet, but what can I do about that? So I think there is going to be a larger customer demand. So I think it's a great opportunity in order to fix those or improve those. But then also I think it's a great opportunity to look at your operations as a whole.
Mhm.
So don't look at just energy saving as energy saving. I think just touching on what Andrew said, it's can you also make that a better customer experience? So you save energy for your tenants, but then tell your tenants how much CO2 is reduced. So I think that's a great story for you as a branding, but also I think it's something that the customers can take away and say, well, we're part of a property that is greener as opposed to others which are not. So,
for me, if I look longer beyond the horizon, I really see in the future with the amount of data on the performance of our asset that will be coming online, and not just energy, but the many aspects. But the powerfulness of all that is that we as an owner, or the boss, and then the senior executive, and then the manager, everybody will know a lot more about the building than before, and then are able to make decisions, and decision will make quicker because if the boss can see that is non-performing, instead of reflecting the bill 12 months down the road, say, why did the power go up the previous year? We can see, well, straight away we benchmark. And then customer can benchmark as well and then say to the owner, hey, you're consuming too much, something is wrong. So I think, in a macro sense, I mean, a lot of university people ask me, what are the future technology we're looking for? I say, in a macro sense, I'm seeing data, but using data to know the asset better, and in that way, we offer better efficiency, better user experience. And I think that will be a very powerful trend in the years to come. And that's how I see it in the macro perspective.
which will also help with your new builds as well.
Exactly, because from those experiences, we can build better building. And a lot of our projects we bid, like for example, we do quite a lot with URA or other different bodies. And when you bid for a project, it's not whether you get more money, but it's how well can you build an asset that is better and better manage it than other people. I think that will make asset owner class different.
Right. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, on that excellent and insightful note, I just want to pass thanks on to Andrew and Pubs for all your sharing today. Wonderful for the audience. So if you are interested, whether you're a large organisation, a small organisation, you're keen to get on that sustainability journey or enhance your existing plans, please do reach out to Pubs. They have many initiatives that can help you, and I'm sure Andrew is also keen to share his knowledge and insights as well. So with that, thank you everybody, and back over to you, Joe, to close up.
Thank you so much, Michael, and to Pubs and Andrew for a fascinating session. It's all quite new to me, but I'm certainly inspired by the prospect of better buildings, better for humans, better for the planet, and better for ROI from the sounds of things. So in closing, I'd like to flag the fifth and final session of the Towards a Sustainable Future series, which will focus on Australia's response to climate change. It's on the 4th of May, 12:30 also. Please register through the website if you haven't done already. We're very excited to have Andrew Peterson, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Business Council for Sustainable Development Australia, speaking to us on Australian climate policy just ahead of the federal budget release on May 11. And we also look forward to welcoming back David Simmons, who is the Group General Counsel and Chief Administrative Officer and Company Secretary at CLP. So a final and sincere thanks to CLP for sponsoring this excellent and inspiring series. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you again for joining us.